Hey guys, it is that time of year again. It is very exciting. We just had recently the Legends Pro Classic. It's the first show before the Arnold Classic, and this show has been a very telling show. I love when the new season gets started, and I wanted to review this show and give you guys some input on who to look for this year, who to look for coming up for the Arnold, and how the show actually went. So let's jump right into it. It was the Legends Classic. It was in Las Vegas, Nevada. Ashley Cotwelser ended up winning, which of course I'm super happy about. We're going to go into her as well. But what I wanted to do is go into everyone that competed and kind of assess the show, give you guys a little bit of feedback on it, and tell you what I saw and how it all went down. So in that top five, we had Ashley, Lauren Dannenmiller, Ariel, Vanya, and Marissa. So some cool stories that happened at that show too. And there's also a couple people that I think could have placed a little bit higher in this show. And what I wanted to do is go into the physiques of the top five and also talk about a couple other people that I think you should be looking for in this season coming up. Now, in this show, there was only 11 girls in the show, but the talent level was absolutely deep. Very experienced top five competitors. I mean, there was a couple competitors there competing all the way back to 2000. I think we had 2013 was one of them. So it's pretty crazy. It's how experienced these girls were as well. Now, the first competitor I wanted to talk about was the fifth place, which was Marissa Rivero. So Marissa hasn't competed since 2017. This was her comeback show. Hasn't been on stage for a long while, and man, she did look awesome. I was really happy with her overall look when she came out. Very, very dense muscle, very dense. And you can tell, she's been doing this for a long time. She's got that muscle density that everyone kind of is shooting for. A lot of times when judges say, hey, I want to see more density out of you, it kind of, you look at someone, how long they've been working out. We call it like young muscle, like, oh, her muscle's just a little too young and she just needs more density, we say. But this is a good amount of density for her physique. Now, the only problem when you have that much density is sometimes you can look too hard. Even if you're not completely shredded, you can get that dense, really separated, kind of almost grainy muscle. And that's not necessarily something you want in bikini. You want to have dense muscle, but you want to have what I call pretty muscle. So she's just getting right to that point where that density might be an issue, but for the most part, it looks pretty good. I think there's a couple areas that look a little hard. If you look at like her overall shoulder, you're seeing these separation over here on this upper shoulder here. It's just a little bit, just a tiny bit much, maybe just a tiny bit softer, and this would have worked really good for her physique. But remember, she hasn't been on stage in 5 years. She's finding out where her shape needs to be now again, and I think she's really, really close to it. I think just a hair softer on those shoulders and a little bit softer on those obliques, so you're not seeing this much detail on the side, and it would help her physique a whole lot. A couple other little things I'd like to see on her physique. I would love to see just a little bit more. She has really, really good ab development. I mean, oblique development. Really, really deep cuts in those obliques. Like, look at those obliques. They're shredded. She is lean. The only thing I'd like to see is, you could see these obliques with a lot of definition and a lot of separation, maybe too much for a bikini. But you're not seeing too much in the abdominals. I would love to see just a little bit more detail in the abs and not so much in the obliques. But all in all, amazing physique. I think her placing was appropriate. There's an argument that she could have been higher, argument that she could have been lower, right there. Now, a couple other things on her backside. I think her glutes are crazy good. I mean, those glutes are really impressive glutes. The tie-ins are insane. I mean, look at that shape of her glutes. She's insane. The only thing that I'm seeing from her backside when we talk about that density again and overall detail being maybe just a hair too much is these adductors. Adductors are just a little bit too detailed. Judges don't want to see that deep V on someone. It's hard to balance it too because you want to have these deep tie-ins, but you don't want to have the deep V on the adductor. And I do think that might have hurt her a little bit in that back pose, because if she didn't have that in that back pose, there's really nothing negative to say. There's really nothing that's too much or anything like that in the back. Now, her glutes are pushing it, but they're at about the limit of where a bikini should be. Now, it's a lot of glute. It's a good amount of glute, but she's right at the limit. And that's kind of where you want to be in bikini these days is right at that limit before it's too much, Other than that, I think everything else looks really good. Her hair, makeup, tan, I think all that looks good. I mean, I would like to see that a little bit more of the lower back. It's going to help her glutes look a little bigger when her hair is not hiding the lower back. So maybe, an inch or two off the hair down here so we can just see just a little bit. The suit is great. I mean, it accents her glutes really well, and a lot of people don't understand the suit cut, but this suit is perfectly cut. If you see, it kind of rides the line of her glute, and it kind of accentuates the glute roundness. I generally want to see a little bit more material in between here, so that it looks like, because the problem is sometimes when your glutes are so developed, they can kind of touch around the material, and when you touch the glutes around the material, sometimes it can look like you didn't hit your conditioning because your glutes are touching around the material. In her case, that's not the case at all. It's just a small suit, so the judges wouldn't be confused by that. But it is something to keep an eye on. For all of you beginners out there, if your glutes are touching around the suit, maybe you either got to nail your conditioning a little better, or maybe you want a little bit more material on your suit. All in all, really good physique, especially for her coming back, being off the stage for 5 years, and now finding the new criteria and where her conditioning has to be. If you remember back when Ashley came back, she took a year and a half off of competing. When she came back, she overshot her conditioning a little bit too. My fault, of course. Still won the show, but she also overshot, because you're trying to figure out, okay, where does my body need to be now with the new criteria when you haven't competed in a long time? So actually a common mistake made, and actually she got very, very close to nailing it. I think that a tiny bit softer, and she might have moved up a spot or two. That's what I would say. I would say just a tiny bit softer in those areas, bring down the adductors a tiny bit, and she probably would have been in that top 3 there. So amazing physique. Look for her coming up. I imagine she's going to be making some corrections and just going to be getting better and better. So very experienced competitor. She's been competing since 2013. So for all of you out there who want to have that density and want to be on stage and rocking pro shows like your first year competing, understand it takes some time. So I like seeing this because it shows, hey, if I want to get that density and that complete physique, it is going to take some time. Next up, we have Vanya. Vanya is an awesome competitor, someone you guys should all be paying attention to. She is making huge improvements, huge strides, almost at every show she's been doing. Last year, she got to the Olympia. She did so on points. She was doing really well at a lot of shows. She competed a lot last year. She can definitely, and I think she's going to get to the Olympia again. And honestly, I think she's going to get to the Olympia this year with an actual win. And I have good reason for that. So here is Vanya's season last year. She went to the Olympia, got 16th. Anytime you're past 15th place, so you guys know, everyone is past 15th is 16th place. So I don't know where she fully finished in the Olympia, but everyone past the 15th marker is in 16th place. But you could see her placings. They were 4th place, 3rd place at Nashville, 2nd place at the Pacific USA, 3rd place, Battle in the Desert, 2nd place, Patriots Challenge, 8th place, Optimum Classic, 9th place, New York Pro, 7th place, Girl Power, 10th place, Wasatch Warrior, 8th place, World Clash. So kind of you could see at the beginning of the year, she wasn't doing so great, and then she really fine-tuned it towards the end of the year, and then it went from going 9th, 10th, and 8th to 3rds, 2nds, 3rds, 4ths, right? That's a huge change over the course of a year. She really found herself in the middle of the year, around the July timeframe, and just started really just cranking out points. She was just crushing it the last part of the year. So she's on an upward trajectory from July of last year, and I think, actually, to be honest, unless something happens, like if she gets injured or something, I know she's going to continue that trajectory. So I was talking to Vanya before, I think it was the night show, and I've seen Vanya a few times. We say hi when passing and whatnot. And I saw her backstage. She was getting tanned, and I saw her legs, and I was like, Vanya, your legs came down like a lot from last year because you look really balanced. And she's like, yeah, I've really been focusing on it. I've really been trying to bring my body into better balance, and I think I'm like almost there. And I was like, yeah, you're pretty much there. Like her legs and her balance from last year to this year is a night and day difference. So she is someone to really watch out for. There really wasn't a whole lot on her physique that I would change at this point. I think her conditioning was great. I think that her posing was good. The only thing that I see in her, and I even mentioned it to her, I feel like the arms are just a tiny bit overpowering to the rest of her physique, but not too much. I would bring them down like just a hair. Conditioning was good. Again, with her and the core thing, maybe a tiny bit more ab detail, maybe just a tiniest bit more conditioning in the legs, but really not a lot. There's not a whole bunch to fix here. So I'm really excited to see her this year. I know she's going to get a pro win this year. I wish her a lot of luck in that. And yeah, just keep an eye on her because I know for sure she's going to do well in this year. She's definitely a student of the game. Whenever you see someone go from placing a lot lower and then just all of a sudden start just climbing and climbing and climbing. Just keep an eye on those people because they've found something. They've figured out they have to make changes. They're not training in a way where it's just for what they want to do. You know, sometimes you get bikini competitors and competitors in general. They're like, well, the judges want, like, for example, I said less arms and less legs for her. And she'd be like, well, I like training legs. I don't think they're too much. Like a lot of times you get people like that, but she's not like that. She asks the judges for feedback. She works on it. She asks other people for feedback. And every time she's getting better and better and better. And that's what it takes, you know, and she's not having bad off seasons where she's just trying to catch up to her last show conditioning. She's a student. She's staying in it. She's competing often. She's staying lean and she's working the circuit, you know, getting known by the judges, competing often. So I feel like she's going to get a win in 22, and I think from there on, she's going to start cracking into the top 15 in the Olympia, maybe even this year. And in third place, we had Ariel. Ariel is dangerous. She is a dangerous bikini competitor that you guys are all going to know. If you don't know, you're going to know her pretty soon. If you look, and the reason I say that is because of this. This is where things are kind of crazy with her. She started competing her first show August of 2020. So August of 2020, I mean, are we barely at 2 years at this point? And she's already making splashes on big stages. So take a look at her season in 2020. She competed August 8th. She got first place. She got first places in her classes. She then competed in December, got first place again. No surprise there. Then she went on into 2021, and she still hit the NPC scene for a few more shows. Then she went to her first national show, got a pro card. So in June, so you go from 10 months later after her first show, and she gets first place and gets a pro card at Junior Nationals. Then she goes to her first pro show, and she gets third place. Then her very next pro show, she gets first place, and then she goes to the Olympia. Like, what the hell, right? Like, who does that? So, I mean, we don't even know how good she could be. All we know so far is that she's competed, and she's, you know, we remember last year in the Patriots show, Ashley did that show, won that show. And so, you know, her very first show is already making noises against big names. She is, her second show, she gets a pro win. She gets to the Olympia, and now we're in 22, and she finishes in third place. Next to two Olympians who finished in the top 10. I mean, she's going to have a win this year, for sure. Zero doubts about that. So what is, you know, when I saw her, I was like, man, she is dangerous because she's one of those girls where if the judges like her, they like that much muscle, she's going to be hard to compete against because she is one of the more muscular bikini competitors. So it's one of those things. Like sometimes there's like situations where it's hard to compete against people. So when you look at like Issa when she was winning, her waist is so small and her V-taper is so good. How do you compete against that, right? So this is another one of those scenarios where she's a more muscular bikini competitor, and if the judges are going with the more muscular bikini competitor that day, there's kind of not much you can do against her, right? She's already like the most muscular bikini competitor there, but she's not muscular in a way where it's not a good thing. You know, it's not like too muscular. Her muscles they're full, they're pretty muscle, you know, they're not overly dense like I talked about earlier. You see she's not having any of those deep cuts. There's no striations in the shoulders. When you look over here, there's like no striations in the shoulders. There's like just hints of it. The detail in the arm is there. The detail in the core is there without being super striated and cut like we talked about earlier without that density. The core has some decent ab separation. Not a lot, just a kiss of ab separation. I think there can be a tiny bit more there. Muscle-wise, she has all the muscle she needs. If you notice in her adductors, what we talked about earlier, she doesn't have any deep adductors. Her tie-in is fully there. The glutes are rounded out, but not squared. Good roundness to her hamstring down low without any separation in the hamstring lines. I mean, this is a pretty complete bikini competitor. There's not much more that she's going to be able to do besides get her stage presence to be a little bit better, to get her posing to be a little bit better. To get more time to work the circuit and get the judges to get to know her. But yeah, she's going to be a very good competitor very soon. I think winning the show within the next couple of shows, honestly. So expect to see some noise from her. Honestly, towards the end of the show with her competing, they pulled her, Ashley, and Lauren at the night show in the top three. So there was a top three. Ashley at the night show pulled ahead, and she was winning the night show with a perfect score from what I talked to at the judges. In the morning show, it was a little closer, but then Ashley tightened up a little bit at night and created the separation. And what they did is they actually sent Ashley off. So there's a top 3 callback. They sent Ashley off to the sideline because they already decided she won. But then they compared Ariel with Lauren because they weren't sure of, they wanted to compare them next to each other because they weren't sure who to give second and third to and if they were going to actually rejudge it at that point. That's how close it got at that night show. So it's a crazy night show. They didn't actually rejudge it. They were just debating on rejudging it when they put them 2 next to each other. So it was actually pretty close. She was in the mix there. So a really exciting show when they did that. It was definitely nerve-wracking because I didn't know why they sent Ashley back at first. I was like, I think that means she won. When they sent her off the line and they're comparing for second, but I'm not positive, so it's Bikini, you just never know. So really hats off to her. I think that she's going to be, there's really not a whole lot to work on for her. It's just, for her, it's going to be an overall stage presence thing. I think that if there's anything to really work on, there's a little bit area in this part of the glute here that I think that she can actually fill out just a hair more. The hamstrings are good. I mean, the front pose is awesome. Her balance is pretty much there. I mean, there could be a tiny bit, either a tiny bit more in the shoulder or maybe a tiny bit less in the leg to bring her into perfect balance. The arms, they're right there. They're right on the border. Again, everything with her, again, it's like right on the border. It's like, maybe it's too much, maybe it's not. It's right there. It's that, and that's kind of where you want to be in Bikini, just pushing that line. So I'm actually a fan of her. I think she's a great person too. She's always got a smile on her face, always super friendly backstage. So I wish her a ton of luck. Another girl I know for sure is going to be getting a pro win this year. And in second place, we have Lauren Dannenmiller. Lauren is an awesome competitor. Everyone knows who Lauren is. She's been doing great. She got top 10 at the Olympia last year, and I do think that she's going to be climbing her ranking this year. I think that she definitely has the capability of coming up this year. I think she will come up this year. And, we'll just see how it goes come that time. Now, she definitely pushed Ashley in the morning show. It was a 1-point decision in the morning show. At the night show, Ashley created a little bit more separation, but definitely a amazing competitor. Now, when we look at Lauren, I actually never got to see Lauren I never really paid attention to Lauren in person. I think I've only seen her as a pro compete at the Olympia. And Olympia, there's so much going on. I didn't really get to focus so much. On this show, I was sitting front row. I got to really see what Lauren has to bring, and it was really nice to see. I've known Lauren since her very first show, which is really cool. We have a cool story that her first show, I was there with my team, and I had 15 people at Colorado State, and it was really cool. Her and her boyfriend, I think it's her boyfriend, might be her husband now, we're talking about, they're like, I would love to start a team like that and get a team like that one day. So it was kind of cool. They tell me that story, so it makes me feel good every time I see those two. And their team, they're doing really good with their team. So hats off to you guys for that. So Lauren, obviously an amazing competitor. When I saw her come out on stage, and you got to remember, bikini competitors that are at that top level, they're so good, it's really hard to see, why does a judge like this competitor? Why does a judge like that competitor? It's hard to figure it out. And it's very confusing. So it's very different per person too. With Lauren, when she came out on stage and how she shines with her stage presence and her overall posing and how she just controls the stage with confidence and her overall posing, I was like, oh, that's why. It instantly hit me when she came out. Real honestly, in terms of stage presence and how she walks and controls the stage and how she just commands attention when she comes out with that confidence, it is it's at the highest level. I don't really think that there's going to be many people there that are going to be at a higher level than that. It's pretty much it. So hats off to her for that. Now she poses in the front pose a little harder than I would typically pose someone, but it works for her physique. I generally don't have anyone sit into their pose this hard and push so hard into it, but you can see how she really pushes that hip out, strong arch to the back, a slight bend to the knee. That's not my typical way of posing, but it works for her. Obviously, it's been working for her really good. I don't know if the judges are going to give her any feedback on that, maybe, because it does sometimes look like she's pushing too hard, but it's worked very well for her. So I don't know what they say about that, but there's not very many people who do that kind of bent knee, kind of pushed hip pose in that front pose, which does accentuate her lines, and it does come at a sacrifice of a shorter torso when you do that. But she's so tall, I don't think it really matters. So I think that is it's a Lauren specific type pose for her physique that's working for her. It's not something I would have came up with if I was posing with her for like a long period of time. I don't think I would have ever came up with that pose for her, but it seems to be working really well for her. Now, as far as everything goes in terms of presentation, hair, makeup, tan, I think everything's great. The only thing this is her back pose when she first came out. You got to be aware of your hair. That's something that the judges want to see. So you want to make sure that you are showing your rear delts. You see how this rear delt here, we can see the whole delt of it, and this one, the hair got caught. Take that extra time. If you feel like your hair is on your shoulder, take that extra time and straighten it out. Make sure both of your shoulders are being shown from the back. That way the judges can see your overall width and your V-taper. From here, luckily they had this shoulder to go off of, but let's imagine if both shoulders had that much hair on it, they wouldn't see any of her shoulders. And the other thing that I said too, I forget what I said it about, but the hair I think is just a little bit long. It's sitting on top of the glutes. She's got a real strong arch to her back, so obviously it shortens you up when you have a real strong arch to your back. Basically, like your hair goes down farther, right, when you're shortening up your torso because you're arching so much. And so her hair is touching the top of her glutes. I would like to see her hair be a little bit shorter because for two reasons. One, you can see the lower back, but also if you think about it, and your hair is creating a wall here. So this wall is farther away from your back. So for example, I'm going to kind of do it like this. Here's your back and here's your glutes way down here. I'll see out here. Well, if your hair is right here, your glutes don't look as 3D. They don't look as big than if your glutes were here and the judges can see your back and all this space in between. Remember, anything farther away, even if it's just like 6 inches farther away, 5 inches farther away, whatever's in front of it is going to look bigger. So if you can see that lower back with pure detail and you create the distance of the glutes to the lower back, right, your glutes, of course, are going to look a little bit bigger. So that is something I think that a lot of people overlook. I want to see just a little bit of that lower back to give me more of the 3D of the glutes, to show me how small is your waistline from the back, how wide are your hips. That's a little thing that I think that she can work on to make some improvements. But these are like tiny things. Hey, make sure your hair's off your shoulder. Cut your hair 2 inches. these aren't big things. Really, there's not a whole lot to work on in terms of her physique. She's already top 10 in the world. The couple of things that I know she knows that she's going to work on, and judges are probably giving her the feedback. I haven't talked to her on that level, so I can't speak on it. Is one thing that she's made big improvements on that I think still needs just a little bit more is her overall shoulders. Now, structurally, one of the best structures in the game, probably top 5 best structures out there for bikini in the world, and that's working really well for her. But overall, needs a little bit more muscle in those shoulders, more roundness to those shoulders. To create that full effect. You can see in the rear delts here too, on this back pose, you want to see just a little bit more roundness to that back pose on the shoulders. A little bit more width, a little bit more roundness. We don't want like a full dense shoulder cap, but we do want some roundness and fullness to that shoulder. And the other thing too, when you get a tall person, sometimes you run into this issue a little bit more. I don't know what the reasoning for it is, but it seems like the taller girls will run into having a little bit more of the ribs showing, and so with her, I would like to see a little bit more ab detail. She's lean enough, so I would like to see a little bit more ab detail. This is probably the leanest I've seen her, but I do think a little bit more core development would help. I think that if she developed her obliques a little bit, she might get these ribs to have better, just a little less detail than that, less prominent on the ribs there. But really, these are tiny little things. A little bit more shoulders, a little bit more muscle in the core, a little bit better rib control. Get the hair off the shoulder, control the hair, cut the hair a tiny bit. We're not talking, change the whole physique at this point. We're talking she's pretty much there already, and these are going to be the final little things that she works on to bring her physique up to, top 5 in the world from top 10. And the way that she's been changing her physique year over year and getting better and better and coming in leaner at this show, I have zero doubt by the end of the year, by the Olympia, she's going to have more shoulders, have all those details fixed, if that's something that she agrees with, of course, and is going to present a better package. I think that her being in the top 5, this year in the Olympia is not out of the question if she makes those adjustments. Because remember, structurally, I think she's already top 5. I think structurally she's probably one of the top 5 physiques in the world. But we're talking about muscle density and muscle fullness and those little things. We're talking posing, again, stage control, confidence, again, still in that top 5. So these are now the little things that she's already has some things mastered, and the little tiny things are going to be what pushes her over the edge. So I'm very excited to see her this year because I know that she's a student of the game. I know she's going to get a pro win. Honestly, she'll probably get a pro win in her next show. and then she'll be Olympia qualified, and then she'll start working on making those improvements and go from there. So dramatic improvements over the last couple of years. She's been competing for a long time too, a student of the game, and I always love seeing her compete. I just love seeing people excel and keep making progress. That's something I always really enjoy watching. So congratulations to you, Lauren, on your second place here. And of course, now we get to the champion, Ashley Kaltwasser, getting her 31st pro win, putting her farther away in the record books. In case you guys aren't following, this is, now obviously I work with Ashley. She's one of my best friends. You know, I see her every day almost at the office here. She's a coach for Team Elite Physique too now. And, you know, it's crazy, but it is the story to watch in bikini right now. How far can Ashley push it into the record books? She's already the most winning IFBB bikini pro in the history of the sport in all divisions, not just bikini, but in the history of the sport in all divisions. She is the greatest competitor there has ever been in terms of pro wins, 3 Olympia championships, 2 Arnold Classics, right? So she is, you know, every time you watch her, it's like, man, is she going to make getting past her and setting the new record even harder? Is anyone ever going to be able to do it, right? So really cool to watch. Every time you watch her, you know, you are watching history. So I think that's the really cool part of it, and it's definitely the most exciting story in bikini right now. So going into Ashley's physique, obviously, you know, I'm her coach, and so we go over her physique a lot. And she's made if you look at her physique from years prior, she has made a ton of improvement since, I mean, really every year she's competed, she's made a ton of improvement. But from last year to this year, her first show of the year is usually her, like we say her first show of the year is usually her worst show of the year, right? We're trying to get the momentum back. She's getting her stage jitters back, or getting her stage rust off of her. She's, you know, we're trying to nail her conditioning for the first time and then carry it through the rest of the year again. And this show, you know, this show was no different. This was her first show of the year. She had some stage rust to get off. She had to get comfortable again on the stage. You know, at the night show, she really, really crushed it, and she was just, you know, a bright shining star. She changed any judge that went for Lauren in the morning, went for Ashley at night. She created that separation, so she really was like, yeah, I just had to get it off of me. I might get that stage rust off, look at my videos, and make the adjustments I needed to. And then she got, you know, we kept our food very, very low from the morning to the night show. She just had some nut butter from morning to night, and then she tightened up a little bit more, and the judges were like, yeah, that was a perfect correction, and that created basically put the stamp on the letter for that first place there. So I was really happy with how that first show went. I am really happy with everything that she's bringing to the table now, and I'll kind of go over it. Now, there's a couple things that we still need to bring up, just a hair, but it's not really a lot. Now, for Ashley, if you remember years prior, one of the things we struggled with was getting her balance right from her lower body to her upper body. She's always just a little bit leg dominant in her lower body to upper body. And that's, you know, comes from her years of track. That comes from, you know, a lot of times how we work out. We know we can get a big calorie burn with her doing a lot of legs. So sometimes we'll push the legs more often than we should just to get her that extra bit of leanness towards the end. And then sometimes her legs will respond by getting a little bit more muscular. Now her physique is very, very balanced. After working on it for, I mean, it's taken a couple years of working on getting those legs to match the upper body. It's pretty close to spot on. And that's why she's number 3 in the world right now, you know? You shouldn't be finding a ton of flaws with someone who's in that top 5, right? So I'm not going to find a ton of flaws with her. And it's not because I'm being biased, because she's number 3 in the world. There's not a lot of flaws to pick on, right? Conditioning wise, this is exactly where she needs to be. If you look at, like, you're trying to figure out, okay, where's the conditioning line go? Where do I stop, right? Well, a couple key factors are, if you look at her hamstrings here and look at her adductors, remember we talked about the adductors not being prominent? There's a tiny bit of detail there, and that's what the judges do want to see, a tiny bit of detail. There's kind of no way of getting away from some tiny bit of detail when you have someone as muscular as the bikini competitors are these days. So, but there's not anything too dominant. There's no deep V here. That's something that the judges always say, I don't want to see a deep V. There's no separation to the hamstring lines. There's a nice roundness. So when I say roundness to the hamstring, you see how this hamstring here is just like nice, round, and full, but there's no separation line. It's like a little ball in there, right? That's what you want to see. You want to see round, full muscles without the separation lines in those hamstrings. Sometimes you'll see girls pushing really hard, and you'll get those hamstrings that are like this. We call them like ham ropes, where they're getting that detail is where it's too much. she is lean to the point where she's right before that deep separation comes in, right? If you look at her muscle, it's pretty muscle. It's not that overly dense muscle. You're not seeing crazy striations in her shoulders. You're not seeing crazy striations in her obliques. You're not seeing the detail, the deep V in her legs, the separation in the hamstrings. You're seeing the detail in her leg up here where it's just a little bit of separation line, but there's no quad striations and separation. This leg here I think is important. A lot of times people will have just skin here and it's just like there's no detail. With her, you want to see a little kiss of detail, just a hair to show, hey, there's some muscle there too. Now, if there's anything in terms of critique for Ashley and bringing her physique up, I think that the only thing we can work on to bring her into absolute perfect balance is a tiny bit more in the shoulders, a tiny bit more in the arms. When she starts dieting down, that seems to be the thing that fluctuates the most. When she starts dieting for long periods, we'll notice, hey, the arms are getting just a little bit noodly, and so we'll have to pull off for a month or so, refeed her, give her a little bit of calories, work those arms out hard. And it's just something that kind of fluctuates throughout the year as she does. She loves doing this. If you ever listen to our podcast, this is what she lives for. She wants to compete as often as she can. She loves every single moment of competing, but it does come at a cost. Sometimes the arms are going to be that cost. And so we have to look at that and make sure that we're not getting too far behind. Right now, I think that she's in a good spot. She's been training hard. I think that you're going to see a little bit fuller of a physique come Arnold, and I'm really, really excited about it. But if you look at her and we talk about those little details, you could see her waistline, right? Her hair is a little longer, but it's not on top of the glutes. You can see her waistline. You can see the difference of her waist to hips, that 3D I'm talking about, right? Now, remember, if her hair, we'll use black here because her hair is pretty dark. If her hair was here, let's just do an example. Look at how much of a difference it makes on her glutes when you can't see any of the lower back, right? And that's what I'm talking about. It makes a big difference when you're covering the top part of your glute with hair and then you creating like a wall to your lower back. Now watch when it disappears, how much bigger her glutes get, right? They look more 3D. Her waist looks tiny. Her glutes look like they have wider width than when it's being blocked with hair. And so that's an important thing that people don't think about. Her rear delts are both showing in this back pose, creating those separation lines. She's putting a little bit of pressure on her hands to create that detail of her rear delt. So all the things are really there, and that's why she's, the queen of the game and queen of her craft, is because she focuses on all these little things. She's always coming to the posing classes. She's actually teaching posing classes this Saturday with us. If you guys are in the Vegas area, she'll be here Saturday, 10 a.m. for a posing class. It's free. And so she's just a student of the game, and there's just not a whole lot to work on at this point. And for her to climb and win the Olympia again, I think the only difference is going to be her shoulders, her arms being just a tiny bit fuller, and then just getting her practice on stage, getting her stage presence down, and just coming out with that Ashley Cotwalser confidence that she has and just owning the stage. It's really just the little things at this point for her. So, it's hard to say she's going to do better this year than last year because she did so good last year, but I do think she's going to do a little better this year than last year. We're starting off at a better place. Her first show, she hit her conditioning. Her last year's first show was a little bit off on the conditioning, a little bit off on the posing. So this was her best first show of the year, and I'm really, really excited about it. There are other first shows we've had. She's come in too lean one time. So this is her best first show of the year. So if this is where we're starting, and if we finished last year a lot better than when we started the first time, I think we're going to finish off in a better space at the end of the year, knowing how we progressed the last year. So very exciting year. The Arnolds are coming up. I'm going to be doing a review on the Arnolds pretty soon, so stay tuned for that. Let me know if you have any questions about anything. If you want a physique assessment, you can send one in to me through the website. And thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you later.